Good morning. Thank you. Thank you, Danny, for that warm introduction. And it has been a pleasure to know him and a lot of you for the last 8 or 9 years that I've been coming to these, and I've spoken a couple of times, and I'm here to give you an update and tell you a little bit about what's going on, so we can go ahead and put the first slide up. I'll try not to take too much time and release everyone for a break here quickly, but I've got a couple of things I want to cover. I'm a registered paramedic here in Alberta, and I've been a paramedic for about 40 years. So I've worked on the front line. I've worked up north on remote reserves. I've worked on some special teams, some downtown specialty teams. I've also worked in Israel. I'm qualified to work as a paramedic there. And I used to go over there and train and work. And I've agreed to go back if they need me on short notice for a war or a terrorist attack or an earthquake. So I have lots of experience. I have been fighting a number of fights in, I was on the front line back when we changed to medical priority dispatch in the late 80s. Before then, you phoned for an ambulance. We took your address, what was wrong, and we hung up the phone. Now, of course, when you phone for an ambulance, somebody who's trained stays on the line and helps you until the ambulance arrives. You become their new partner and you help the patient. So I was involved in that as well for a number of years. So over the past dozen years, I have been screaming at the top of my lungs at my superiors, at leadership, I have written and spoken on the subject of paramedic hallway waiting, paramedic response to emergency events, and just recently we've been conducting some town halls in rural Alberta to kind of spread the message about what we can do, because right now, rural EMS especially, but Alberta Health Services EMS in this province is a dumpster fire. We have a number of paramedics, a large number that are booked off with both physical and mental health injuries. The response times to, thanks for your support, appreciate it. It's a huge problem, and the lack of support that we get for mental health concerns and our physical health concerns is growing. So we've tried to turn some of this around, and it's been a struggle. So let me get back on track. This is a picture from the paper from 2007 when our then chief Tom Sampson, our medical director Andy Anton were on the front page saying, "Why are we waiting so long in hospital hallways?" Well, I can tell you that hasn't changed. Regardless of everybody's attempts to mitigate or the 40 or so procedures or policy changes they've made to try to improve or reduce hallway waiting, I can tell you that, and we'll show you some slides a little later about how many trucks are waiting in the hallway at any given time. In fact, this might be a good time just to read very quickly 3 notes I got this morning. One of a good friend of mine was going to be here. He said, "Sorry, I won't make your talk today. Spent the whole night in Calgary doing one call after another." That ambulance is based in Olds, Alberta. 12 events in the entire city, and Airdrie 1, Airdrie 201 are both downtown in Calgary doing calls. Pritis, Okotoks, and Cochrane on 3 others. That was last night. And at 5:15 this morning, one of Airdrie's ambulances was engaged on a local emergency. The other 2 within a 10-minute span were both tasked with emergencies in Calgary's downtown core, leaving Airdrie in what we call a red alert when there are no ambulances available. So this is standard procedure. It happens every day and night. Rural ambulances get taken from their home communities and brought into the city of Calgary to help do calls in Calgary. Next slide, please. So the information on what's going wrong is out there. It's just not easy to find. It's certainly not readily available from Alberta Health, but it is available if you FOIP it. So one of our paramedics FOIPed a bunch of information. He's shared it with a reporter, and he was immediately put on administrative leave for 11 days. And at his hearing, he was completely exonerated when he handed them his FOIP receipt that showed that he had done everything above board. He hadn't gone into their secret computer system and taken any information. But what he found out was that the number of red alerts in Calgary in 2020, that's where 0 ambulances are available in the Calgary Tire Zone, entire Calgary zone, was over 3,000. So red alerts sometimes don't last very long. As soon as you get 1 truck back, you're out of red alert. But then if that truck gets a call, you're back in red alert. He FOIPed a number of stats like that. As well, Next slide, please. As well, the union started paying a little more attention and getting calls from paramedics who were telling them, hey, there's nobody on this truck today. The Vulcan ambulance has been shut down. How many ambulances does Vulcan have? They have one. They have one emergency ambulance. And when it's shut down, that's 6,500 square kilometers that has no service. Next slide, please. They also kept track and published on Facebook, on their Facebook page, when the ambulances were downgraded from advanced life support to basic life support. And I can tell you there have been more than one instance where basic life support in the rural communities has not been enough. Imagine you're at a construction site and somebody gets critically injured and a basic life support unit shows up. They can do a few things. They can package and transport. But if somebody has collapsed lungs and needs to be decompressed, that's an ALS, advanced life support skill. They don't have the training, or the equipment might be on the truck, but they're not trained to use it. Imagine then if a firefighter who used to be a paramedic, or is a paramedic still, but who today is working as a captain on the fire department vehicle, shows up and says, hey, wait a second, I'm a paramedic. I can take that equipment and I can perform that life-saving procedure. Well, it's a bit of a sticky situation. That's really not his role in that particular case, but he's forced to step into it because there was no ALS paramedic available. Next slide, please. August 30th. 40 ambulances waiting in the hallway in Calgary hospitals. And again, this is information that may not be verified in the official way, but this is a count that was done by paramedics routinely by looking at their information that they have and then phoning the union and saying, this is what I see right now. This is how many ambulances are waiting at Calgary hospitals. Next slide, please. Again, with a FOIP request, you can find out how many calls your small town ambulance did in Calgary and how many calls were done by other ambulance services in your small town or city. In this particular case, we're talking about Airdrie. And the numbers are dramatic, and we won't go into them for the sake of time. Next slide, please. Many towns now have information that's being shared on their local rants and raves pages. Hey, last night, the Cochrane ambulance, the last emergency ambulance available in Cochrane, was given a call in Calgary, putting Cochrane into red alert. One of the comments at the bottom, this poor woman phoned 811 and was told if the problem gets worse, phone 911, get an ambulance. And she said, no, I'll call a neighbor. I have a better chance of getting there on time. Next slide, please. One of our paramedics who FOIPed this information in a one-year period found out how many times other ambulances responded to Airdrie. And again, remember, when they go to Airdrie, they leave their home communities empty as well. So how do we fix this? Well, let me give you we're going to play a little game. We're going to pretend we all live in the same small town, okay? So we're all members of the community, your town, any town. And I am going to do what I've done in 10 communities like Banff and Canmore and Cochrane and Strathmore and Airdrie and Okotoks and High River and Claresholm and Vulcan. We came out and we did a town hall. We contacted a local journalist. We said in 2 weeks, we're going to be at the Legion. And we'd like to invite anybody who's concerned about the level of ambulance service in their town to come out. Why the Legion? We love the Legion because number one, they always treat us nice. They open the door and say, sure, you can have a room. And the bar's open. So you can have a beer and you can sit down and you can talk with the other people in your community about problems you have in your community. And at the end of the night, we always pass the hat and make up a little collection to give some money to the Legion and to pay for some of our expenses. So support your local Legion. Again, it's almost November 11th. I drove past, they're putting up the crosses on Memorial Drive this morning in the rain. Good for those volunteers, and let's not forget about those people. And let's use the Legion more often. Terrific place. So we show up, and in Vulcan, we had 80 people. In Cochrane, we had almost 100. And we had people come, well, we had journalists come to keep us honest. right? So that if we said anything that wasn't true, they'd catch us and call us out. We had some speakers, George Porter, Dwayne Clayton, some famous paramedics retired. People kept asking us the name of our organization. We told them we're the OPA, we're the Old Paramedics of Alberta. And we've just seen what's been going on for too long. We don't see it turning around. In fact, we see it getting worse. And we're not sure how to fix it because we've all tried. So we've decided to take it to the people. Okay, so here in town is our local MLA. We've got 2 town councilors. We got a couple of business owners. We got the fire chief. We got a woman who sat beside her husband as he died and waited 35 minutes for an ambulance to arrive. We got a couple of paramedics in the back who came in uniform. They're actually brave enough now to risk discipline because of how they're being treated. They do 12-hour shifts every day, and frequently they're expected to work 13 or 14-hour shifts because they just can't get home. They clear the hospital, they try to get home to the rural community, dispatch gives them another call in the city, and they're tired of it. They're tired of missing getting their kids to bed, they're tired of missing dinner. We've also got the wife of a paramedic. She's here to complain that she's tired of her husband coming home angry and burned out. So we're all together here, your town, any town. And you're here to listen to me tell you how bad things are and what we can do about it. So fire chief will talk a little bit. He says he's been keeping track. He's been keeping track of when the ambulance leaves the station and goes to Calgary and when they come back late. He's asked because he's in the same building. We've got a woman who says, I knelt beside my husband and waited for the ambulance to arrive and watched him die 35 minutes. Ambulance had to come from Calgary because our ambulance was in Calgary doing other calls. And that happens too often. So we've also got these allied health professionals, nurses, sharing with us what happens. You know, there's a small town in southern Alberta where the mayor actually went to the fire hall one night and took the ambulance, was out of service, and went to a person's house and picked them up and took them to the hospital. He was arrested. He was charged. The mayor of Vulcan, brave guy. He's proud of it. Theft. Yeah, he went to the fire hall and stole an ambulance and used it. I know. And you know what else Alberta Health has done? I grew up in High River in EMS. I showed up one day, told George Porter I heard you're looking for volunteers. I'd like to help. He said, well, if you got a class 4 license, we could use some help tonight. I said, I do. I drove cab in high school. He said, well, come in an hour early and Joe Savartka, he'll show you how to work the stretcher and the lights and siren. And that night I started working on an ambulance. I worked 12 shifts in a row and I was hooked. So that doesn't happen anymore. There are no ambulance volunteers left in any small towns. It's prohibited. If you don't have a PCP or an ACP license from the college, you can't work on an ambulance, a licensed ambulance. So that's wrong. So we're going to talk about that, your town, any town residents, and we're going to discuss what we want to do about that. One thing, next slide, please. One thing we're going to do is we're going to form a citizens action group. And we've now built several of those. They have Facebook pages, they have regular meetings. They are developing their own terms of reference, which are just a list of what we're here to accomplish and what success looks like. And some of the things they want to accomplish are things like, we want our emergency ambulance in town as often as possible. We don't want our emergency ambulance going to the local urgent care and transporting somebody with a broken arm or a hurt knee to the hospital for further tests in Calgary. We don't want our only emergency ambulance being used to go to other service areas to transport patients to the hospital for an MRI or a CAT scan. That sounds wrong, but it's actually the right thing to do. Your local emergency ambulance belongs in your town, ready to serve your citizens when they have a real emergency. If you've got a non-emerge patient who needs to go to the hospital for tests, or, and I've done this call, taken a patient from Claire's home to Calgary for orthotics, who should do that trip? Pardon? A taxi? A family member? If the patient can't walk, let's say the patient needs to be on a bed because they're going for an MRI in the city. How about an alternative transport option? Now, I don't like to say the word private in some instances. Like Ian said, it makes people a little crazy sometimes. The slippery slope to public, to private healthcare, that's bull. Private ambulance, I'm sorry, you got to be careful when you say this. Private non-ambulance transport companies like Aaron Paramedical are moving patients in Calgary every single day. They take patients interhospitally from PLC hospital to the foothills. They move patients from the South Health Campus Emerge to other hospitals. They take patients home to nursing homes in Claresholm. And the only reason they get called is because the urgent care or the emergency department manager says, I have called AHS. They have said they don't have an ambulance to send me. This patient's been here for 6 hours. They're taken up in a bed and Emerge. I need them out. I'm going to phone Aaron. I'm going to get them down here. They're going to do the trip and it's going to free up a bed. And we're going to move the patient to where they're supposed to be. And that's the right thing to do.
But look, Don, that's not going to happen in Canada. It's not going to happen here because we've got too much liability.
Thank you.
We've got to deal with that.
Yeah, there's a lot of, what's the liability? These are licensed private transport options. They're licensed by the province to move patients. They have qualified paramedics on them with licensed vehicles to move them. And if you would rather yourself, if you would rather lay in the Cochrane Urgent Care overnight because there's no ambulance to bring you with a broken hip from Cochrane Urgent Care to the foothills, which is a 20-minute trip. If you're going to stand on your public or your public option only good leg and say, no, I'm going to wait for an AHS ambulance. Well, they're busy. I'll tell you right now, Calgary was in red alert last night for, I'll bet 2 hours at least, with paramedics sitting in the hallway. And I know, because I get those calls every day. I'm in the High River Hospital. I've been diagnosed with a mass in my abdomen. It's 1 a.m. And I laid in that bed in High River because I couldn't get to Calgary to see the specialist for 9 hours because they couldn't find an ambulance to move me. There wasn't one available. The crews are burned out. As a matter of fact, Ruth Wilson, who's the president or the mayor of Black Diamond, came to our town hall meeting and she said, Don, I know what's going on and I want to build a shield around our paramedics so that they are rested, trained, and ready to respond to serve us on our worst day. And that's what paramedics do. Unit hour utilization is a term that's not really complicated to use. Unit hour utilization, if paramedics are working 50% unit hour utilization, 0.5, that's pretty much the max that they can be working. Because the rest of the time they have to be eating, right? Going to the bathroom, training, working out, studying, cleaning their rig. They have other duties. So if you bump unit hour utilization up to 80 or 90%, which is where it is right now in this system, you have paramedics who are driving dirty ambulances, who are not getting the training or the rest they need. And then on top of that, you ask them to work an extra 2 hours at the end of their 12-hour shift. This is a recipe for disaster, and it's happening. We don't have the stats on exactly how many paramedics are booked off, but I can tell you it's a very large number. So go ahead.
Well, I'm just wondering, when you say there's 40 ambulances to get reports from your there's 40 ambulances parked at Calgary.
Yep.
Are they unstaffed?
These are 40 ambulances parked at 4 hospitals in Calgary, probably 10 at each, or 14 at one and 6 at another.
They're not moving for unstaffed.
Those paramedics are waiting in the hallway in Emerge with their patients, waiting for them to be admitted, waiting for them to be accepted by the hospital. So yeah, they can't perform transfer of care. You tell me how it's possible to abandon a patient, and this is a longer discussion, but you tell me how it's possible to abandon a patient in a tertiary care center in the Western world. I personally don't think it is. My patience and my sympathy for the hospital not accepting patients has evaporated over the last 15 years. Paramedics belong in the community, doing what they're designed to do. And if you're going to use them and use them up by keeping them in the hallway for hours at a time and burn them out, you're going to have no EMS. You're going to have no paramedic service. So we need to find solutions for these problems. When I talk about a citizens action group or I talk about a town hall, The pitcher, of course, will be the speakers. The journalists will be the catcher. First base is people showing up with their stories of being injured by long EMS response. Second base is paramedics, shortstop are their families, allied health professionals at third, and the outfield is your MLA, your town councilors, and your local business leaders. That's the team you need to regain control of your local ambulance service, and that's what these town halls are designed to do. We get enough citizen action groups in enough towns together, and we go to the province and we say, no more. No more are we going to let you. I mean, this is not, we used to have mutual aid agreements where Calgary and Cochrane would agree to share units back and forth. If we need a unit in the city, great. If they need a unit for a big crash in the highway, super. But no, this is a giant province-wide mutual aid agreement that nobody would ever agree to in any rural community. No rural community would ever agree to have their fire department vehicles or the police department vehicles taken to Calgary for an entire day. Why is it okay for the ambulance to be treated like that way? It's destroying your EMS, it's hurting your citizens, and it's burning out your paramedics. So with that, if there are any other questions, I'd be happy to answer one or two.
We have time for a couple of questions. Yeah, it's a question.
Just a quick story to what you're talking about. 18 months ago, I was in Foothills Hospital visiting my brother-in-law who had a ruptured abdomen.
Yep.
While I was visiting him, the guy in the next bed who just had surgery needed a dressing change, and he waited 6 hours. He called 911 and the paramedics came up from the goddamn emergency department.
Shocking.
This isn't healthcare.
Gaylord, yeah, but
So
you're right, but
I hear these stories at town halls all the time. And we have people come and say, you know, I waited for 11 hours. I had been diagnosed with with a hot appendix. Got to go to the hospital and get it out. If it ruptures, it means an extra week in the hospital. This guy waited 11 hours. I hear these stories at every town hall. Breaks my heart. But I'll tell you what, we build citizen action groups in every town. We're going to defeat this.
yes, but actually tell our audience at home what Gaylord said, because that's a good point. I've heard that story where someone waiting in the hospital called 911.
Oh yeah,
you
that
tell them the
happens.
story so people know
Wait.
what we're talking about. I know, yes.
But we have people.
I know, but
Yeah.
let him tell
You
our people
cannot-
at home because they
Yeah,
can't hear you.
I mean, I get it. It's, you know, he's telling a story about waiting in a hospital in a room with a patient who called 911 and a paramedic came up to the hospital room. What hospital was that?
Foothills,
Wow.
just down the street here.
Any other questions, or
It's,
we're tight for time, but okay, you're going to be here for you'll
Yeah.
get your coffee time, and we're let's oh yes, go ahead.
Same thing happens in British Columbia, so don't feel like you're alone.
Okay, well, we feel
there's
better
so
now.
much more information. We could talk about the Ernst & Young report. We could talk about how these private or these alternative transport options could be managed. But there's a lot of work to do. And I got to tell you right now, citizens are on the front lines in the rural communities doing this work. So thank you for playing along. And I appreciate it. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to talk to you during the break.
Okay.